And thank you to the witnesses. Our criminal justice system has different effects on unique populations, as you have raised. The Sentencing Project published a report this year examining the ways people of color are disproportionately affected by the criminal justice system. And, Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter this report into the record.
Without objection.
That report explains, and I quote, "Once arrested, people of color are also likely to be charged more harshly than whites. Once charged, they are more likely to be convicted, and once convicted, they are more likely to face stiff sentences, all after accounting for relevant legal differences such as crime severity and criminal history." Ms. Ryan, can you describe some of the racial disparities you have seen in the juvenile justice system?
Thank you, Congresswoman. There are disparities at every step in the process. So young people of color are more likely to be arrested, more likely to be formally processed instead of getting diversion, more likely to be prosecuted, much more likely to be incarcerated, and much more likely to be transferred to adult criminal court. And this is well documented. The Federal Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act has required all states to collect data on this, and we see this in almost every single state.
Also, if my son was here, he would say much more likely to just be stopped in general.
Absolutely.
According to testimony the American Civil Liberties Union submitted to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in 2014, sentences imposed on black males in the U.S. Federal system are 20% longer than those imposed on white males convicted of similar crimes. That testimony also highlighted that nationwide, about 77% of juvenile offenders serving life without parole sentences are black and Latino. Ms. Ryan, how are these disparities reflective of those we see in the system overall?
These disparities are very reflective of what we see. I mean, I visit facilities all the time, and you see young people of color in these facilities, and what we see in terms of the disparities of kids being in adult criminal court, that's where the highest level of disparities are, at the point at which kids are transferred to adult court or prosecuted in adult criminal court, and certainly they're subjected to life without parole and other sanctions that adults face in those circumstances.
Mr. Levin, I see you shaking your head. Did you want to add anything?
Oh, no, I certainly would agree that the data certainly shows that there are disparities. And, I think one of the ways we often think about it is particularly in the area of drugs, that, and this goes back to what I was saying about policing, I think it's very important to have the police in the neighborhoods where the most crime is, but we need a different type of policing. And so one of the challenges is, of course, if a youth or other person has drugs on them, they are more likely to get caught if they're in an area where there's more police. Yet we need the police in those areas that have high violent crime, which are in many cases areas that have large minority populations. So the challenge then is to change the type of policing that we're doing. And we have people like David Kennedy with the National Network for Safe Communities. We're doing call-ins that have Operation Ceasefire in Cincinnati, High Point, North Carolina. These have had great impact by working with ministers, grandmothers, bringing the community together, getting people out of gangs, giving them positive opportunities. And once, someone is, for example, in New York City now, if they do find marijuana on someone, they're typically given they go to a desk, they get a citation, they're brought to the nearest police office, it's a desk appearance, they don't go to jail. So there's better ways to deal with it, and that can help reduce some of the disparities, handling things in a reasonable manner, particularly when they're very low-level offenses.
Mr. Ring, your organization, Families Against Mandatory Minimums, has called for policymakers to further reduce the disparities in sentencing between crack and powder cocaine, and it also called for existing reductions to be made retroactive. Why might it be important to further reduce the disparity in sentencing and to have that disparity reduction apply retroactively to people who were incarcerated prior to the change?
Quite simply, Congress, when it passed the Fair Sentencing Act and made the change in the crack law to lower the disparity between crack and powder cocaine, admitted it goofed. You had members who were around then saying, we didn't know what we were doing. We just pulled numbers out of the air, and we passed this disparity. And mind you, the Reagan administration asked for 20-to-1 disparity, and it was the Congress that moved it to 100-to-1. So there was sort of a pox on everybody's house there. But so Congress passed the law, made the change, but it didn't make it retroactive. So now you have people serving decades for decades-long sentences that Congress admits were a mistake. And so until you make it retroactive, I know the President's trying to do some of this piecemeal through commutations, but Congress really should act and get all of those people fairer sentences, because it's the height of injustice for them to serve those when they know anybody sentenced today is going to get a much lower sentence.